Okay, so let's get started. So I'm Leanne and this is Dane, both from the Tiny Housing Co. So we are going to be discussing how we want to be implementing tiny houses into the UK. I do have a presentation first to start, and then what we're going to do is listen to all your questions. So if you've got questions throughout the presentation, we'll answer them right at the end. We're going to try and get through as much information as possible. So the presentation is about 30 minutes. We'll complete the presentation and then we're going to go for a quick 10-minute break. We're going to gather all the questions and then we're going to come back online for 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, depending on how many questions there are, and answer as many as we can. And this will also allow you to ask questions to each other. So I actually have been talking to a few of you back and forth. I've even met some of you. And I've actually recently learned that quite a few of you are in the London area, or you're in mainly this south area from Brighton, anywhere from Brighton up to London. So if we can connect people, if we can help with supporting people to gain more people to join the communities, if you've got one in mind, or if you're just starting out, we've got people who come to us and they don't know where to start. They want to live the lifestyle, but they just don't know where to put their tiny house. So just a matter of connecting people at the end. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Which one? So me and technology are a bit useless. This is why Dane's here.
Okay, guys. So as Leanne was saying, so we'll just jump straight into it because we don't want to waste anybody's time. So what we're going to discuss today is a bit of our vision. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is also going to be about some of our models. So I'm just going to run through a bit of a disclosure because, again, it's going to be depending on how we build our construction methods. So we can't talk about tiny houses from other manufacturers, but it will at least give you a general understanding of what tiny houses are, planning rules, etc. So today's information is for educational purposes only. We're not part of a council. We've only, or have been given support from planning officers. We're not experts in planning, but obviously, when we encounter people day to day, we offer and we cannot offer official legal advice for any plans for your tiny houses. So anything we do say, again, it's in passing, information we've gleaned from online or read reports, read the news, all of these different things. So hopefully you'll still get some useful information which can be understood for your different areas, but we always do advise that you either chat with a planning consultant or even have a conversation with the council so you can understand what's apparent for your local area, because the north is different to the south, Wales is different, Scotland's different, Northern Ireland, etc., because we don't know where everyone's on. So all the boring stuff out of the way. The aim today is to discuss how we plan on implementing tiny houses in the UK. As we're all aware, it's not the simplest of things to get going in a tiny house. So we're going to talk about how we feel like we can help do so. How you could potentially join a community. I know 1 or 2 people in the group are already trying to do that already, which is amazing. And then also how we can help you to set up your own community too. So for a very quick one, if you don't really know who we are as a company, so we are a socially led company. So our goal is to help people get on the housing ladder, live better, live more sustainably, and through that is to build tiny homes using healthier, sustainable materials. So almost zero plastic in our homes, unless it's absolutely necessary. The wall buildup is lots of timber, lots of natural insulation. We follow something called passive house principles. So that means very minimal heating and energy usage for the homes. We also use solar panels. So again, that's part of the passive house principles. Minimal costs running the homes too. So this provides a clean, healthy air inside the home as well. Because of the natural materials, it's breathable, but equally use something called MVHRs, which is kind of like an aircon system, which helps to filter the air, but it also helps keep the inside and the ambient temperature. And as I mentioned about the solar, so we are designing it in such a way to be very low energy cost. So it should, almost everywhere in the UK, run 100% off-grid. So why are we doing this? Well, we believe that, your home should be warm, but equally it should be healthy, and your monthly outgoing should be low too. And we believe that's what tiny houses embody, allowing you to have the freedom of choice, obviously, to live the way you want, and not one where it's hand to mouth or just living is costing you the earth. So that's really a bit of our ethos at the Tiny House & Co. So there's a wide range of people here today, 49 of you in total, including ourselves, but many of you might not be sure of who actually lives in a tiny home. So typically we get a broad range. We get young couples who can't get on the property ladder, single people who don't really need more space in a tiny house, or maybe they've lived in tiny flats and realized it's actually ample space and they don't really want to get a huge house. On the other side, people who have once maybe lived in a caravan, or they've done van life, and again, just used to compact spaces really. And then a different side of people, you get environmentalists, so people who are seeking freedom from the rat race, wanted to downsize, and certainly want to live more of a minimalist lifestyle. That's quite a broad range of people, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, we do get asked quite often who is kind of living for, and the answer that we always give is it really is for everyone. So we get people from as young as 18 all the way up to, I think we had someone who was 81.
81, yeah.
Which it really is so vast. So yeah, I think it's one of these things where a house is for everyone. So this is kind of the point. I think it's more the reason why people choose this. So this is why we've added this on as well. So why people choose to live in a tiny house. I'm sure you've all got your own individual reasons as to why you're looking into this lifestyle. Predominantly the first one is it's a fraction of the cost of a brick home, and a lot of people tend to want to reduce their monthly outgoings. Some people can't even get onto the property ladder. No, it's all right, don't worry. Some people can't get onto the property ladder. Others, we've got people who are they're splitting from a partner and their money's tied up in a home, and it's either the choice of spending lots of money on renting, or they're looking at taking out loans to live in a tiny house because that's the only amount of space that they need. So yes, there's multiple reasons why people do choose to live in a tiny house, and we'd equally love to hear from you, because what we tend to do, we get people who come to us and they just say, I just want a tiny house, and don't want to share their information with us, which is absolutely fine. Other people want to give us a full length essay as to what's happened and why they want to live this way. But these kind of customers, they really do help us and give us understanding as to really the other reason, alternative reasons why people are choosing to live tiny. Okay. So this is just a message from one of our customers. So just a message, we asked them what are their thoughts on tiny house living and why they think people are choosing it. So with the increased costs for a brick home and with rising energy prices, I believe the people of today are less inclined to seek a place in the rat race, with a vision more aligned with reconnecting with nature, taking care of the environment, and enjoying more personal financial freedom. And this is something we just feel wholeheartedly we agree with. So that's why I just wanted to share that message with you. Okay, so moving on to the implementation. So this is how we feel we want to implement tiny houses here in the UK. So there are 3 methods that we're looking at currently. This one was actually suggested by a lady who's actually on the call right now. So hi. So right now we're looking that you've got, let me start again. So the second one, so there's three methods that we're looking at. So you've got these 40 to 60 sites. You've got predominantly women, by the way, as well. So I should answer that. I'll go into this one a bit more in detail. The second one is your first-time buyers, and then your third one is an eco site, eco village, should I say, is what we're looking at. So this one, we've noticed there's lots of people who are single and don't particularly want the whole traditional tiny house. They're looking for more of a ground floor unit, or they're looking to be with people who are sort of like-minded individuals, but equally in quite a green and active environment. So we've been looking into how we could achieve this. Now, if it's a ground floor house, which we would always make them passive, so they're carbon neutral, they would reduce annual bills as well. Also healthier living, which is a priority for us. We would follow what's called a park home site, because they would fit within those regulations, because the one key thing, as I'm probably sure most of you aware, if you've had a look at trying to get planning, is the size of a tiny house does not fit any UK regulations. However, if it's a ground floor model, it can come under a park home.
Yeah, so to add to that, you know, we see park home sites up and down the country. They're typically over 55s or more, usually quite expensive, anywhere from 300 to 500. Maybe I've even seen 600,000 for a park home. But in that case, they seem quite disconnected from one another. It's just the home. Here's where you park your car, and that's it. So our vision would be to use the same planning rules that you can do for a park home, build within the same regulations, but like Leanne just said, we will build better, to be frank. So passive homes, they would have thicker insulation, they would have the mechanical ventilation, they would have greener materials, they would have the solar, but we would build the design in such a way that it's more in keeping with a community-like appeal and really brings people together. So this is a good way to have the blend of what tiny house living could be in a community aspect, however, using the current planning laws that are in the UK for building something bigger, all on a ground floor. So that's currently one of the routes that we're looking to implement. The second one, so first time buyers, as Leanne said, you know, we get people from 18, 20, 25 and upwards. People obviously want to buy their own home, and we are looking to support them in lots of ways where people obviously, you know, they don't want to leave their own towns or their work. Maybe they're just going up the ladder in their job and they don't have the luxury or even want to, you know, go somewhere miles away. So what we're looking to do, we're speaking with councils, we're speaking with large developers and estate owners who would be willing to use something called an infill site or small areas part of an estate where they could say, okay, we can put a small 30, 35, 40 square meter compact home or a tiny home on this area. Maybe there's 3 or 4 of them. This can work really well with brownfield sites as well. The councils are looking to find ways to use leftover land as well, which might have been undeveloped for many years, and they can place a handful of these units on the edge of towns. So one of the issues that tiny homes sometimes come into is when they are being placed in the countryside or what is termed as outside of a development area. Councils don't really want this to happen because of supposedly it's breaching the green belt. So this is a good way to say, okay, well, we understand people still want to live inside the towns and cities, but they want to live in a small space. So the councils do have obviously a need to house people, and there is obviously the land that is already viable to be developed, such as brownfields. So we're having some positive conversations at the moment with some developers and 1 or 2 councils. And if there are any people in the group that have already spoken with councils, may well be interested as well, then we'd love to hear from them as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, so we've also with this model, this is the one that's probably going to be taking the longest amount of time. So it's not something that happens overnight with this one. This one might happen in 3 to 5 years. So it's obviously liaising with these companies and giving them understanding of what we do. It's a bit of a chicken or the egg with this one. So to be able to work with these people, we need proof of concept that we are a house builder. Now, while we're a tiny house builder, we technically haven't built a physical house that meets minimum space standards. So what we're going to be trying to do is to build a couple of minimum space, compact homes, get them on site, which may be part of an eco village or will be part of, as we said, the park home site. And then once we get proof of concept, then we can start working with these people. But it just seems to work in our favour that a lot of these new build estates, and as you imagine, these companies, you know, obviously are full of greed. And if there's a spare sliver of space and they can make money from it, then they most certainly will choose a compact house to be put on there to sell. That also brings us down to the other side, downside to it is the plus side with doing this model is we can put tiny houses or a compact house. It wouldn't be quite a tiny house space. It would have to be about 35 square meters, and it would be a brand new model, and obviously wouldn't be on wheels. This tiny house will be able to be up and down the country across many sites. So the pro to this is this allows somebody to still remain in their town. So if you don't want to particularly leave your work or your friends or family behind, the goal for this is that you don't have to leave. It's just be on that estate, and it will be a first time buyer home. It's just a compact space on that property. However, we would be selling these to the estate, and they can decide how much they want to sell them for. So it wouldn't necessarily be our tiny house property. That's the con to that. But just being transparent with this, do remember that as we mentioned right from the beginning, we are manufacturers of tiny houses, so we don't work with local councils. We are not planning consultants. We just want to support and help as many people as possible, and this is why we spend a lot of time meeting, greeting people and trying to learn more about the tiny house communities that are already out there and how we can help them. And this is just one of those ideas that we came up with as one of the common things that we hear quite a lot, is people saying, I want to live tiny, but I don't really want to leave my job, or I don't want to really leave my town. And that makes it really difficult, because that means you're either going to have to build a community on your doorstep, which can take a lot of work, or if there's no land in your area, or it might be an expensive way to do it, especially if you do live in quite an expensive area. So yeah.
And the last one, which is somewhat of a blend between the other two. So this is, the term eco-village is not new by any means, but certainly sometimes you hear the word eco-village and the homes are very large. So we would take the eco-village aspect of using our passive house design and construction methods, and to use the small idea of tiny houses or compact homes. So this would be 20 or 30 units is somewhat of a small estate, but it gives us that ability to say, this is functioning, it works, there's interest in it, and this could potentially be rolled out throughout the country. Anybody can join, of course, there's no minimum age or whoever you may be. 20 to 30 units, which would be entirely off-grid. Now, sometimes the off-grid word means, it's everybody's going to, live in squalor almost, or they're going to be in the middle of nowhere. So what we've been doing is we've tried to use, again, the passive house principles of minimum heating and minimum energy use, coupled with solar power, which can generate all of the energy required, and then connecting it to off-grid systems for water as well. So we are working with a company in Eastern Europe that has a fully off-grid water system, which only needs rainwater go into it. It cleans everything, it harvests it, and it makes it potable water again. So the idea is, when we say off-grid, we mean it's decentralized. It's not connected to any outside services whatsoever, and it's fully self-sustaining. So with the passive houses, the solar and the recycled water connections, our idea is to raise money for the land and the groundworks, and we will arrange for financing for the units for people to purchase. And then potentially the additional income, if we're generating excesses of energy from the solar, for example, could be sold back to the grid if we did choose to do so, or there may be other ways that we can sell that energy in other forms. Equally, we would like to use the idea of growing food. So everybody either having access to a communal plot, such as even just in a large area, or everybody having a garden, a community shop, because we feel sometimes some developments are very large ones down to small ones. They could be 2, 3, 4 miles away from the local shop. And again, that's far, it's transport, it's energy required, which is just not necessary. And even maybe the compost, which could be generated from the estate just by the food waste and other materials, could be something which is sold to also generate money for the community or the village. So that's a bit of a blend of the other models.
Okay, so the fun part. So as ever, communities cost, and if you're actually looking at setting up a community, I imagine you're probably looking at something very similar to this. And if you are new to starting a community, you might want to get a pen and paper out and to start making some notes down of how much. This is an example of an eco-village cost. So this is based on the materials that we would need. So for example, Dane did mention this water recycling system. So it's quite expensive to purchase. So as you can see, it's called Space Strip. It's £60,000. However, once purchased, you don't need to add any more water. You don't need any wastewater works. It's just continuously cycled water that is free from there on. So I don't need to go through it all. You can make notes through, if you do need to make notes for the general setup costs. So we have solar, we need concrete bases for them to be closer to passive house standards. So this creates further insulation to reduce the need of energy for heating in the winter. You'll need your general, so you'll need water connections for yourself. If you were just using regular water, you need to have a look at how far away you are from your nearest water connection and decide on your wastewater options. So you do have, you can just connect to general wastewater pipes. There is the option to create like soakaways, or there's also tanks as well that you can just have emptied out. All of those will be in different price ranges. Then you've got your general paths, car parking and gardens, and that can range from, depends on what you really want to be doing for your site. What you'll find from our experience, what we've heard is if you have paths, car parking, gardens, landscaping, and it generally looks like, quote, an estate or a site, you're more than likely to get it through planning than what you would making it appear as if there's just 20 units just sort of dumped on a plot of land, shall we say. It's really important to really think about the aesthetics of the site and how it appears to a consultant, and what their thoughts of the site would, how appealing it would be to them. And then that leads to the planning fees. So planning fees can whatever they cost, they're different for each plot of land, so you can't really put an exact number on that. You would need a siting company to obviously set up and site the units, and then obviously a purchase of land. So we've been looking at sites from 3 to 5 acres at around 50 to 150,000 pounds. So this is for the eco village of ours. We'd also like to know from the people who are trying to set up communities, what kind of size plots you are going for, how many people you're trying to, how many people are you planning for on these sites? It would just be interesting to see if our ideas are aligned, and yeah, that would be great. And then obviously the purchase of your tiny houses. So looking at the total groundworks for a community based on 20 units, which could be up to 40 people if there's 2 people per unit, that would be anywhere from 143 to 263,000 just for groundworks alone. So you can already see how expensive this gets to even just set up a site. So yes, so that's about £7,000 to £12,000 per home for groundworks. Now, we understand that these things aren't cheap, and this is why we are looking at raising money for a site. And we think that right now in the UK, while it's huge in America, it's huge in Australia. I'm sure you've all watched Living Big in a Tiny House. I'm sure you've all watched Tiny House Nation, or you at least know about them. And right now in the UK, it's almost there. So we get contacted quite a lot. Actually, I'll just move on to the next slide because it will just explain a bit more about this. So right now we are in contact with TV productions who have interest in creating some form of documentary here in the UK, understanding how it would work here in the UK, what the lifestyle would be like here in the UK, and just the entire journey from start to finish. So how we're going to start the eco village is we're actively asking them for money to begin. So the idea is that they've already said that they can provide anywhere from 50,000 up to 120. The higher the number.
No date.
Oh, hello. So the higher the number, the less likely, the longer it will take, and the less likely they are going to put that money through. So we're going to be seeing if we can get 50,000 from them, and if not, then there's many other ways to raise the money. The raising of the money isn't the issue for us from our side. We obviously will donate 20,000 because we want to be a part of the cause, and we would love to be able to say that there is a tiny house community here in the UK that is official. That would be amazing. And then the rest of it is raising money. So there's a multitude of ways to raise money here in the UK, from donations from tiny house enthusiasts to working with funding sites, GoFundMe and things like that. Okay, so we've got the funding side. That's obviously at the very beginning part of our journey, and then it's also finding people who are generally committed. So I imagine for yourselves as well, if you're starting a community, this is quite important as well for to recognize who is going to be generally committed to you and who is just following the movement, and then let's say that you're ready to set up your community, and lots of people just drop out in the last minute. So do make sure that people are happy to relocate to the location, that they are willing to relocate their job if they still need to work, or that they can work from home, and actively involved in supporting of raising money, should you be raising money yourselves for the groundworks. And then obviously actively involved in helping with setup. This might be helping with landscaping, or even just doing the gravel paths and things like that. And then we always say being able to at least commit for at least an hour a week of maintenance, whether that is just watering the garden, a bit of de-weeding, and just making sure that the community is it generally is quite nice.
So to add to that, I think that in our research, when we've been looking at how possible communities can work, or eco-villages, we've looked at America, we've looked at New Zealand, we've looked at Australia, Canada, and some of the key points are what Leanne's just been describing. You could totally just have an estate, let's just call it that, where people buy a home, they move in, and nobody really talks to each other. Whereas in a more of a community basis, I think there is, not that we want to use the word commit, but when you feel committed to one another, you have a better sense of community. You join together, you spend more time together. And from what our research has found is that communities will last 10 times longer when everybody works together, they know each other, and they're also supporting each other. So whilst 1 to 2 hours of saying, oh, can you go do some weeding, or can you help everybody join today because it's harvest day, for example, it's a minimal investment in terms of your time to live in a much better, healthier lifestyle. So that's just from what we've found.
Okay, so I've mentioned the GoFundMe. So yeah, so just moving on. So and this is why we mentioned right at the beginning, is why we are not, as I said, we're not counsellors, we do not do planning, we are just here to support and to do whatever we can to create one of these communities, place them onto the ground as the UK. You can tell it's a Monday, right? But yeah, so the approach that we will be taking when it comes to planning is the eco-village aspect and using the environmental goals. So we have a couple of customers right now that are putting in full planning for a tiny house, and nothing's gone through as of yet, but we've been working really closely with the planning consultants, and what they're doing is just really skirting over the idea that it's a tiny house. And what we're doing is really pushing the eco aspect. So our homes having triple glazing, they're now, we've just recently changed a few of the materials. They're much closer to passive. We always have followed passive house principles, but they're much, much closer now to this day. And I'm sure every month we continue to innovate, and we will use our build methods and materials to help push the eco aspect. And that's why we're going for an eco village. And this should be able to help us find, with the right council bearing in mind, who has an environmental stance and somebody who would love to follow the journey of, because what we would like to do as well is we would not only have it documented by, say, a production company, we would record it ourselves, and we would also have like a local university to get involved, and they would do like mental health checks, they would do physical health checks, they would also calculate how much energy we're using.
Yeah, because I think one of the biggest goals right now in society is, we face a lot of difficulties, especially getting on housing ladder. Cost of living crisis is more apparent than ever. But with tiny houses, they are difficult to get through as they are. So our focus is entirely on the eco side of things, and eco is a bit of a catch-all term, but that's why we want to build towards passive house standards. So the government has they've put their own laws through to decarbonize obviously everything that they do, to do low carbon input, to have housing to be built to better standards. So our viewpoint, when we've spoken to some councils and planners and other people in the housing sector, is if you build better, if you build to these standards, you'll have a much easier chance of being able to either place one of these even in the green belt, or working towards an eco-village. And so having a small space, when you compare it to something which you can say is carbon negative or even carbon neutral, it's very low in terms of energy requirements, then that makes it much more attractive for a council to say, okay, well, whilst it might be smaller than is normal, we will understand that it's much better for the environment. And even some councils might like it just because it looks better. So I think one aspect is trying to understand what your council does. So take, for example, we're in Warwickshire. Warwickshire has a climate policy where they say that they want to be carbon neutral, I think, by 2035. So have a look at what your council is doing. If they seem to be very green, or they want to do better things, they want to push the eco side of construction or housing. I know down in Teignmouth Council, down in Devon, they talked about compact housing earlier in the beginning of the year. So really have a good look at what your council's local plan is. See how these kind of housing aspects can really work with what's already going on. So typically, some of the timings that happen for preparation of a plan like what we're talking about, this is a little general, but before there, as it says in the top, the note is that finding the land obviously can take a long time, as well as financing it and gaining planning, which could be anywhere from 9 months to 1 year, or even maybe longer. But once all of that's in place, financing is arranged for the homes, then things can start moving quite quickly. So first month, all the plans are coming together and we've got the financing.
Just to pause there, we did miss a part on one of the slides. So for anybody who's actually seeking financing now, we understand that this is very difficult right now. We must speak to like 3 financing companies a week. It's ridiculous. And the closest we found to successful financing is only for 2 people, and it's a 35k loan for 2 people making 70,000, which is paid back over 5 years. It's about £500 a month per person. Now, while this is pretty poor for financing, we continue to push these people, we continue to ask for more, we continue to try and ask for 10 years, even 15 years. And the whole point in the reason why we're even talking about this today is because once we actually can get a tiny house, an eco village or a tiny house community on the ground that uses our, sorry, just one second, that. We'll answer questions later, just because the clock's ticking and we've got 3 minutes left. So with the financing, we continuously work with financing companies to try and get some better financing for you guys. But until there is proof of concept, which there isn't right now, we need a tiny house community on the ground that is working and functioning, and people are even using this rubbish financing that we've got and are paying it back and it's all working in order. Not until then, people will go, oh, actually, well, go on then, we'll actually provide you with the right financing that you require. So it's always baby steps, but we do feel like within the next year that we should get somewhere with at least some form of much better financing, at least like 10 to 15 year loans. And
with the eco-village aspect as well, going down that route, it will be classified as a dwelling, which would mean that you would be able to get a full mortgage, i.e. you could get up to 25 or even 30 years. So there are benefits by going down that approach, whereas compared to something like the park home approach that we mentioned a little earlier, maximum loans for that kind of property would be up to 10 years, or typically 5, like Leanne just said. So there are, positives and negatives to the 2 different approaches that we've discussed. So obviously some of those benefits are, if you go with the lower financing that we just mentioned, it could be paid off in 5 to 10 years. So you are then debt free from your home, especially when you're looking at it from a passive house style home. There are no further bills to pay because there's almost zero to do. All your expenses from the electricity and the heating will be covered by your solar panels, and the passive house principles will obviously have a healthier, cleaner home, because we use MVHR. So this ventilates the air and it helps create a natural temperature inside the home as well. So living in a greener, better place, there's lots of research to suggest that it's better for your mood, even your vitality. And some of the other aspects of the eco villages, or even the other models that we suggested, where you can grow your own food, you can have a community shop or sell compost. So there's lots of benefits that can really come from living in this kind of way.
Okay. So this is where we're going to take a quick break. So it's going to be about 5 minutes, and then what we're going to do is go through all your questions. And then if you want to send a message into the chat box, what we can do is, if you want to introduce yourself, maybe you've got a community, maybe you've got a community, or there is something that you do want to share with the group. I do know, so I've got a few people that I am going to introduce. So there's a few people in the London area that I do believe that want to connect. If you do live in a certain area and you're looking for people to join your community, or you don't even know where to start, just put your questions into the chat box. You can even email me directly, and then yeah, it's going to go in 1 minute. So we'll be back in 5 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A time. Okay. So yeah, we'll be on soon.